The most thrilling, spine-tingling series ever.
From the pages of R.L. Stine's best-selling books,
And the screams go on forever and ever.
We now return to Goosebumps.
Greetings, Goosebumps fans, young and old, big and small, living dead and undead. Welcome back to the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Isaiah Vargas, and I'm joined by my good buddies, Bjorn Palanick and Nick Shaw. As always, we are the Goosebumps Crew, and we are back to talk some Goosebumps. Of course we are. That's what we always do. If it's your first time joining us here on the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, I want to sincerely welcome you all. If you are or have ever been a fan of the popular Goosebumps series of books or the monster franchise that they spawned, then I have a feeling this podcast is going to be right up your alley. Because as I always say, me, Nick, and Bjorn are some of the biggest Goosebumps fans on the entire planet. We can talk about Goosebumps for hours. That's exactly what we do here on this podcast. So every week we have a brand new episode talking about everything Goosebumps. From the books, TV shows, movies, video games, merchandise, whatever it is, it has Goosebumps in the name. We're going to talk about Goosebumps so much that your ears are going to bleed at the mere mention of Goosebumps. So with all that said, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you leave a like and comment. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the Goosebumps Crew YouTube channel and hit the bell notification to get updates when new episodes go up every Wednesday. But if you're just dying to get new Goosebumps Crew episodes, you can catch the audio-only versions over on our audio platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. New episodes go up on Tuesdays, so a day before the YouTube versions do, over on those platforms. And of course, you can follow the Goosebumps Crew on social media and Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. You can also follow Bjorn and Nick at Goosebumps Aussie Fan and Sean, respectively, on their social medias and their YouTubes. All of those links are in the description below, so check them out. Join the Goosebumps Crew today. Become a crew member. We appreciate your support in advance. And since we are still in the month of October, we are now halfway through the month, and Halloween is approaching ever so closer with every passing day. We are still in the month of GooseTober here on the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. Halloween episodes and topics all month long. If you guys have been tuning in at the start of the month, we did a top 10 list, the top 10 Goosebumps books, but we would have loved to see as Goosebumps TV show episodes. Then in our second week, we watched the fan-made documentary Goosebumps, The Saga of Scares with the original creator, Matt Rasmussen. That was a really fun one. And last week, we celebrated the 9-year anniversary of the first Goosebumps movie with puppeteer Avery Jones and a special appearance by Slappy the Dummy himself. That was a real fun one. So this week, we have a super special guest. I never thought I would ever be given this introduction, but here it is. You may know him as the creator and founder of the Cinemassacre online video company. He's done, created and hosted many shows, including Bored James, You Know It's Bullshit, Rental Reviews, Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, and many more. He's a film critic, film fan, filmmaker, and most importantly, he is an angry video game nerd. I'm so happy to introduce Mr. James Rolfe to the Goosebumps Crew. James, how you doing tonight?
Oh, hey, very good. Well, thanks so much for the great introduction and for taking me down this trip down memory lane with the Goosebumps.
Absolutely. We're very happy to have you. And trust me when I say, I mean, you are, to me, definitely, you're an absolute inspiration. I mean, you've been doing online videos for many, many years now. And, you know, when I think of people on the internet who just love the horror genre, you come immediately to mind with stuff like Monster Madness and stuff like that. So it's an absolute honor when we're very glad to have you. Welcome to the Goosebumps Crew.
Well, thanks so much.
Absolutely. And of course, you know, with Mr. James Rolfe here, we're going to be talking some Goosebumps, and we're going to be talking about some horror in general. Like I said, if you guys are unfamiliar with James's content, he hosts the Cinemassacre YouTube channel and website. He's done all sorts of shows, including probably the most popular one being Angry Video Game Nerd. But James is also a large horror fan, and he's done so many, he's incorporated horror into a lot of his shows, whether it be in the style of filmmaking or just talking about horror movies. So we're going to be talking about Goosebumps and horror in general. But James, we always talk about how Goosebumps was sort of our like first introduction to the horror genre. But you've been experiencing horror movies and horror monsters since you were a kid. Can you tell us what got you interested into horror?
Let's see. Well, I started watching classic horror films when I was like probably 11, 12, and Goosebumps must have came out when I was 12. Here, let me look at the list. I could find out. Okay, so I'm looking at a list of all the Goosebumps releases, and July '92, that was the first one, and I must have just turned 12 when that happened. So I think like that was like my first horror literature as far as I remember. Oh, well, then there was the Crestwood House books. Those were these books about the classic monster movies. Yeah. I mean, I worked my way up with that kind of stuff, and I didn't start watching modern horror films till I was like, I mean, I guess I'd be like about 15. I started watching like Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff like that. But I know a lot of people who watched them even younger than that, so I don't know where I would be. Typically, I was pretty delayed with things, I would think. Just like I know that I wasn't really allowed to watch a lot of horror stuff because I had a very overreactive imagination. I had a lot of nightmares as a kid, and night terrors, I'd say also, when you're having like a waking nightmare. I had sleep paralysis as a kid, and I'd be fascinated by these hallucinations I would see. It would only happen out when I was a kid. I wish it would happen again. It never has. But it fed me with all this creative fuel. I think what made me not scared anymore was the horror movies, because then it made me see how everything was fake. Everything was imaginary. One of the things I remember about the Goosebump books was whenever there was any type of description of anything gory or anything bloody, any mention of blood whatsoever. I mean, right here, monster blood, right there. So it's like any type of gory description. There was one called it was the Mummy one. You guys remember what was the title of the first?
Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there you go. So that one, there was a description in there. Do I have that one? Let me see. No, I don't still have it. I used to. There was a description in there about, like, one of the kids was teasing the other kid, right? And he was saying, like, how when they mummify the corpse, they take the brains out through the nose. And I think he was just doing it to, like, gross out his friend or his brother or whatever. Mm-hmm. And the description of it, I remember being, like, so gross. And I was like, oh, my God, check that out. And I'd read it out loud to a friend of mine. I'm like, yo, did you know this? They take the brains out through the nose. And, like, anytime I talk about gore in like, a very, imaginary type of make-believe kind of way, I would get in trouble. So I think I was too young at the time, and I would always get sent to, like, the school counselor and have to talk about it and everything. So I had to really, like, keep that stuff on the down low. So that's why I was sort of sheltered by some of this horror stuff at a young age. Nowadays, there's probably so many YouTube channels where they discuss, the gore aspect in horror, and like, oh, what's your favorite kill in Friday the 13th? Like, it's a make-believe thing. We all kind of discuss this as, entertainment. Mm-hmm. But back then, this was a little more taboo. I have some of the books from my childhood. This is all the ones I was able to dig up just now. It's actually kind of surprising they still are here. So this one, Be Careful What You Wish For. It's got like Scotch tape on the side, so I guess it was like falling apart. Mm-hmm. I could tell just by how worn they are. Which ones I read.
Well loved.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Because then, so these newer ones, like these ones, you could tell are brand new, and they don't have the numbering on the side. Mm-hmm. Or I guess it would be up there, but they didn't have the numbers here.
Yeah,
so these came in like a set, like I got for my kids to read, which they have not read them yet. The older one reads a lot, actually. Her reading level's very advanced, actually. The younger one, though, she doesn't want to read these because she says she saw somewhere on there it said ages 8 and up, and she's 7, So she's like, no, that's 8 and up. I can't read. I'm like, oh, if I say it's okay. But,
A rule follower, I see.
yeah. But the older daughter, she reads stuff way more advanced than this, actually. But she never read Goosebumps. So I haven't yet had the chance to relive them through my kids yet. I might not ever, because certain things they just won't be interested in. Nothing you can do about that.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you don't want to be like just forcing your stuff on them, like everything that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My sisters were the same way because, for me, I got into Goosebumps. So I wasn't born at the time that they were like seriously popular. I was born in '01, so I missed like the whole '90s craze. But I caught them when I was in second grade. So this was like '09, '10, stuff like that. And I was going through a period where I didn't really want to read. I was more interested in video games, so I would be like playing my DS and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't want to read. But the moment, and I'll tell you the thing that got me about the Goosebumps books right away was the cover art. That was the thing that hooked me in because it just looked so, it would look so creepy or just so like interesting. Like that's the thing about like a well done book is that it has cover art that pulls you in and makes you want to find out why does it look like that? What is that monster? Like, you can't scare me. That one right there in particular. I remember I just loved that cover as a kid and made me want to read the book.
Tim Jacobus was the hook that pulled you in with his cover art.
Exactly. That's how he mentioned it to me when I had talked to him the first time. He was like, I'm like the fishing hook and I reel you in, or no, it was like I hook you and R.L. Stine reels you in with the story. So it's like a 1-2 punch of that sort of thing. But once I got into it, I was like, I went from reading basically not at all to like books every week. I was going to the library every week. I was going to the bookstore every week because I just love these books. And my sisters kind of caught a little bit of it. They never got to the same point that I did, maybe for the best, but like they would, want to go get the books themselves. My youngest sister, she kind of has fallen out of love with it. She hasn't read them a lot, but for a while she was like, can I borrow like some of your Goosebumps books so I can read them? Like, we're reading them in school. So it is funny like how certain things can come back in modern generations, and Goosebumps especially.
Oh yeah, like it definitely had that resurgence, and I didn't even realize how much you sent me that YouTube documentary. It was really interesting. I didn't realize like how long it went. I mean, I know it's been recent as well because I've seen the Jack Black movie and all that, but I didn't realize how it went away for a bit and came back and all that. Like that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, definitely.
Yeah, that's cool. It's still going strong after all this time. Because let's see. So, I remember when they first started coming out. I mean, I guess this is still my original one. I guess. It's pretty worn on the side. So,
is it got a number on the side?
Let's see. I mean, other than like the number one.
Yeah.
Am I looking on a certain spot?
Well, if it didn't have number one there on the spine.
Oh yeah, like like right there.
Yeah.
An original print, but yeah, when it has a number one, that's when the books got popular. They started doing a lot of reprints.
Yeah. That was our collector.
The first 6 books were kind of the trial run to see if it was going to make it.
But I thought you meant maybe there was like some kind of like code number or something else. But yeah, I'm gonna look at. I'm gonna look at that list really quick because so it looks like Stay Out of the Basement. I definitely remember that one. Monster Blow, which I have here. Oh, Say Cheese and Die. I remember being really fascinated with that one. I didn't realize until later it was based on a Twilight Zone episode, A Most Unusual Camera, which actually it's not one of the better Twilight Zone episodes, I think. I mean, it's a great concept, but it's not one of the best made episodes. But Say Cheese and Die, I remember thinking that was just a really cool, concept with the camera. Even if it wasn't original, it was kind of written in a way where I remember it describing like this death, or like it took a picture of like somebody who's like in the picture they're dead, their neck was broken, and it described like the twisting of the neck. And I remember that kind of like really like messing with me. Like that really haunted me, just that image in my head. So yeah, Curse the Mummy's Tomb, we talked about that one. Night of the Living Dummies, classic. The Girl Who Cried Monster, I definitely remember, have that here. I remember that one with the teacher who was the monster. And I'm just kind of whipping through them real quick. Okay, The Haunted Mask. I remember that same year, or earlier that year, I made a movie about a haunted mask, actually, where somebody puts on a mask and they become, somebody else. They're possessed. So I don't know where that trope originated. Like, I thought I was influenced by Goosebumps, but the book came after. So it might have been, there's probably a bunch of origins for that story. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you were the first to come up with it before Stein.
Maybe.
I doubt it.
We're a trendsetter on that.
Stein's original origin for that one was because his son had a Halloween mask and saw that he couldn't get it off. He was
instead of helping him, he went and like jotted down notes.
Yeah.
They started jotting down notes, I guess, for inspiration for that story. And to this day, I think he says it's still his favorite one he's written.
Cool! Awesome.
Doesn't read Goosebumps.
That makes sense because that was the only one I remember reading in one entire sitting. Which, I mean, they're all very possible to read in one sitting, but I would typically read a little here, a little there. But Haunted Mask, I remember going to bed and was like, I'll just read like the first chapter, and I got so engrossed with it that I ended up finishing it all right before bed.
That's R.L. Stine.
I understand that is my obsession. Has been for over 30 years with the book. So
yeah, no, Stein had a sneaky way of doing his writing because every single chapter would be a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
So it was in that situation where if you're reading and you're like, okay, I'll probably read to this chapter and then be done. It's like, no, there's a cliffhanger, and then you're like,
yeah.
I gotta know what happens.
Yeah, that I think was my first criticism toward a Goosebump book. Like at a certain point, I was like, "Oh, come on, you're gonna pull that again?" And a lot of times it would be a false scare. It wouldn't even be like I guarantee if I just go to any chapter here, let me just go to the end of any random chapter. Okay, end of chapter 12. And saw the tall, lean monster stagger toward me, its face dripping with dark blood. There you go.
Yeah. So it's like, well, wait, I can't stop now. I got to know what.
Yeah.
Yeah. The beginning of the next chapter might say something like it was just like a big giant poster or something, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. It's the cat or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Or it's like a big dog, and it's like,
yeah.
Oh, he was a sneaky guy. He
was reeling you in, like you said.
He was smart.
He just kept adding bait. He kept like, oh, we've got to put more bait on that.
Yeah.
Well, and the thing about Goosebumps was that, when that came out, it was kind of the first of its kind. Like, you obviously had books that were horror intended and there were like young adult books, but like the closest you got was maybe like teens, that sort of thing. So you were still into sort of like my mind is going to Fear Street. So R.L. Stine's first series before Goosebumps, that was more for older teens, but that dealt a lot more with like ghosts and demons and murderers and stuff like that. So it was like still not necessarily intended for kids. But here comes Goosebumps. It was made with kids in mind. And that writing style, while we can talk about how frustrating it was for us to put the book down, it really was like genius because it kind of played into the curiosity of a kid. Like you want to know what's going to happen in the next chapter. So, I mean, if that was intentional, then by God, he did it.
It works. Yeah, it totally did.
And speaking of other books,
the most glorious book is Welcome to Dead House. I mean, it talks about how like skin peeling off and like head being smashed against a skull being smashed against a grave. Because in Welcome to Dead House, he was writing this, but he didn't really have the balance yet of the silly, goofy, and the horror. So he just went straight up horror with Welcome to Dead House.
Into like the gross descriptive details really were like there in the first, I'd say maybe 20 books. By the time it started going on, it became a little more goofy and campy, which I mean is totally fine. But you sort of lost sort of the the dark edge in the like earlier books, but they also didn't think that they were going to get so many. In fact, actually, they were originally Scholastic was originally considering ending the series at book 6. So like, but because they were so popular, they were like, I guess we got to do more.
Oh wow.
So,
Yeah.
but
Wow.
speaking of
Yeah.
other scary books, I'm curious because, as we said, there was a lot of other, books that were like horror intended before Goosebumps and after. Were there any other, like sort of books or authors that you like found yourself reading around that time?
Oh yeah. I mean, Fear Street. I read a couple of those, and I think I was actually. When did I start reading? I started reading Michael Crichton once Jurassic Park came out, so that would have been
93.
yeah, like yeah.
Even before that, maybe because that's when the movie came out. But
Hmm.
um, yeah,
And I also
Yeah.
Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, that series of
Oh
books.
yes. Yeah, with the really scary illustrations.
Yeah, those things were
Mhm.
creepy. Did you ever
Yeah.
watch the movie?
Oh no, I haven't. How is it?
It's a pretty
I
decent
enjoyed it.
movie. It's certainly it's a PG-13 movie, so it's not like super gory, but I mean they skirt the lines at
Yeah,
times.
but the
And they
practical
do
effects are awesome.
and they do a good
That
job
was
of
one thing I'll
lifting.
give it super good props for.
They
Not
do
a
a
lot of
good job
movies
at
do a lot of
lifting that
practical
artwork
effects, but
from the books too.
yeah,
So you have
they
like
brought that to life.
yeah.
Harold the Scarecrow is on a lot of the posters and advertising, but then you have like the Pale Lady and you have the Jangle Man, and it's like right out of the book. So I would definitely recommend it to anyone who read the books growing up.
Well,
But
cool.
and then there's also Stephen King, who usually
Hmm.
gets roped in with R.L. Stein. They even had a
Hmm.
whole joke about that in the Goosebumps movie, where
Oh
R.L. Stein
yeah.
gets really mad when he's compared to Stephen King.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's like, "Let me tell you about
Oh,
Steve King.
Green
You
Bro.
wish
Yeah.
you could write like me."
They are
They said,
very different sides of the spectrum, though. So,
Definitely.
oh,
Well,
well,
and
apparently in the magazine they wrote that R.L. Stein was a training bra for Stephen King.
oh,
I didn't even know that for
so it's
so long.
like you read R.L. Stein and then you go to Stephen King. Like that's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
oh, okay.
Well, I remember I was talking with when I met Doug Walker at a con. He told me that like he didn't read Goosebumps growing up because they were busy reading Stephen King. So like
Oh,
that
okay.
was their series that they read.
Okay.
So it could work both
Yeah,
ways.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I know I was reading like Poe also, like a lot of Edgar Allan Poe, which is a lot more difficult. A lot of the old time wording, and very very vague kind of stories. Like sometimes the stories aren't really meant to make a whole lot of sense.
Hmm. Yeah, they just they create a nice gothic atmosphere though, and like the way
Yeah.
and the imagery that
Hmm.
they and that's another thing about Goosebumps is that I'm so glad that even now they never did books really with pictures,
Oh
because
yeah.
even especially as a kid, and I know you said that you had a very creative imagination. Um,
Mhm.
Anybody who reads those books, like I feel you get way more out of a book when there's no pictures because you can just imagine in your head what a creature looks like or what sort of the more gory aspects of
Yeah.
something. It's way
Like
better
other
than
than the
pictures.
cover, yeah. Hmm.
Exactly. So you get like that taste on the cover, but it's all left up to you and your imagination to fill in the blanks as you read. And I feel like that's
Yeah, yeah.
part of literature, and especially in the
Yeah,
horror genre.
yeah. Yeah, what's really weird is like I when I look at the lists of the Goosebump books and like when they were all released, for one thing, I thought I remember them being released more frequent than they were actually. Like it
Hmm.
seems like it was like one a month or one every other month, and sometimes there were two in a month, right?
Hmm.
And when they were coming out, I remember it seemed like it was a lot faster. And I guess because there was also Fear Street and everything, and I was like, how can this one guy be writing so many books? Like this is crazy. And another thing was like I thought it went on for more, or I thought I was reading them for longer than I did, but it seems like I'm thinking the last one I read was either well, I remember the one with the B here. I have it. It's number 17, and I remember like I clearly read it because it's all worn out, but I remember thinking that this cover looked kind of silly with the kid's head on the bee. And then I mean, you could tell me if this is right. But Go Eat Worms, that was number 21. I remember that one being like, if that's the book I'm remembering, I remember it being really disgusting. Is there a part where like the worms are underneath the flesh, like it gets into the skin or something?
Yes, I do believe at one point. I think it's like a dream sequence, but yeah, they do describe like how it's like crawling under his skin. And funny enough, there's a new Goosebumps show on Disney Plus. The first season came out last October, and they did an adaptation of that book, and they brought that into the episode. So the way the worm they sort of changed it though. So in that episode, the worms sort of like take over the kid's body, and it's almost like I equated it to like the symbiote to Spider-Man, where it's almost like Venom. And whenever he's like a daredevil, so he's doing like all these crazy stunts, and one of them he like rides his motorbike off the school, and I think he breaks like his collarbone, so his neck's like all kind of messed up, and there's a bone sticking out, and then you just see crawling underneath, and it like fixes the bone, and then it like goes back in, and it's like it's disturbing. It really is.
Wow. So I wonder then if that's July 94. That would mean I'd been reading the books for 2 years by then, and I'm looking at the titles for the next ones. I don't really remember any of the other ones I'm seeing. Or maybe.
Because they were like for kids, you know, like, because you said you were, I think, 12 when you read Welcome to Dead House, and by 94 you would have already been like 14. So you would have been reading like Stephen King and Fear Street, like you would have transitioned into the more adult sort of books.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, it's possible that maybe the worm one grossed me out enough to stop reading them. I don't know.
That's very possible, and. To tell you the truth, Go Eat Worms is not a well looked back on book because of how gross it is. It was kind of like the one that pushed the boundaries just a little too far, and I don't think they ever did anything. I don't think he ever did anything like it again.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, it is a very gross book and a very gross TV episode too. They did 2 adaptations for the
really?
And the new one.
90s one.
Wow.
Yeah. Was not a great episode. It's considered like one of the worst episodes, but then oddly considered one of the best episodes in the new Disney show, like one of the better ones. So it's like, well, the worst episode and the best episode. So I don't know.
Wow. I'm going to reread some of these time, but that worm one, I'm going to have to reread that. And I just want to see like what was it in there that really, got under my skin,
so to speak.
Yeah, so to speak.
But that means you didn't make it to Chicken, and that's a terrible tragedy right there.
What's it called again?
Chicken. It's book number 53.
Okay. That's a while.
It is the greatest Goosebumps book ever written. The greatest,
weirdest
entire franchise. Okay, underrated.
No, and I'm curious to know because so you caught the Goosebumps series in its very early years. Did you notice like sort of like the big boom in popularity it had? It wouldn't have had it super big in 92, 3, 4, but like around 95, 6, like did you start seeing it like pop up a little more?
I don't remember. I feel like I don't really recall seeing any Goosebumps stuff for a while. Even the TV show somehow like it totally slipped by me until later. I think I saw it. I happened to just catch it on TV one time. And I was like, oh my gosh, a Goosebumps show, really?
Yeah.
And it happened to have Adam West in the episode I was watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Attack of the
Yeah.
2001, and I'm
Yeah.
so
Oh, that means you missed the games then. The original.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yep. So I did want to bring up because you do talk about movies, but you do talk about video games. There were some Goosebumps video games, mostly PC games, but video games nonetheless.
Huh.
That one right there, Escape from Horrorland, funny enough, was developed by DreamWorks. It was directed by Steven Spielberg, and it had Jeff Goldblum as a vampire in it.
For real.
Oh, wow.
It's
Yeah, actually,
so
I think it was in that documentary you sent me. They showed some clips of it in there.
yeah,
That was the
Yeah.
first time I heard of it.
yeah. It was a very weird game. I've never played it. I hope someday I can.
But it sold a lot of copies when it came out. Like it was very popular. Like when it came out, I can't remember how many units, but so many million units were sold. Like, but obviously during Goosebumps craze, I mean, probably a lot of parents just bought it, thinking like, oh yeah, Goosebumps game. My kid who reads them is going to love this, So it was
Wow.
very apparently it was very popular, but yeah, I don't know. It slipped by. It also slipped by a lot of people too. So yeah.
Wow.
Did you ever have a book that you like considered your favorite at the time? Like if you can remember?
Oh, yeah. You know what? I think it was Sphere by Michael Crichton because I was just kind of like, ever since Jurassic Park, the movie came out, I was just reading all of his books. And I mean, I don't know what made me so obsessed with him. I think it was just like that one movie, and then every book was so different. But I just started going through them, and Sphere, I remember like I just loving that book. Or like I read it twice, like in a row. So yeah, I mean, I haven't read it in a long time to recall what it was that like fascinated me so much. But yeah, that one at the time was I was really big on that.
Speaking of Jurassic Park, I actually rewatched the movie recently. I haven't watched it too many times in my life, but I rewatched it recently with some friends, and I'm just blown away by like that was 93 and just like the clever mix of practical animatronics, puppetry, and CGI, like early CGI was just incredible for a movie like that. And I'm always told by like people in my family just like how much of an experience it was seeing that movie in the theater back then, like just how incredible it really was. So I can definitely understand how the interest spiked up in Michael Crichton's work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's still today my favorite film.
Oh, awesome.
It was such a masterpiece. Like, so I was born in '85, so I grew up in the '90s and got to experience all that stuff. I mean, '90s was a great time. I mean, you had Goosebumps, you had Jurassic Park, you had Batman the animated series, you had X-Men the animated series, Spider-Man the animated series. I mean, it just was endless. There was just so much stuff out there to watch, whether it was movies or TV. But Jurassic Park was a game changer. And I don't know. Did you ever get to watch the behind the scenes featurettes on it? Like at the time they were trying to do clay animation, I think, with the dinosaur stuff, but then CGI kind of came in and they kind of
Yeah,
scrapped all that.
yeah. It made everybody have to step up their game because it was like this crossroads, like which one's going to win? Is it going to be the CGI or is it going to be the stop motion? So they had to like really, not just the stop motion, but the animatronics as well. And everybody who was there was bringing their A game to the table. Like it's like we got to like make this the best possible because like, our field is like the future depends on it. And it was kind of sad to see like Phil Tippett, he didn't get to do like all the stop motion that he wanted, but like whatever they chose to do with that movie was like the right choice. But then I think like, yeah, but like since then, a lot of movies were like, oh, we can just do CG without really like taking it all into account. That's like, well, that movie was a combination of everything.
Yep. Yeah, it would not have been the movie it was. I mean, it had a great story, don't get me wrong, and a great cast, but obviously the dinosaurs are the stars. And to know that Stan Winston's dinosaur animatronics are there, like physically there, is a whole different tone than just CGI or even stop motion.
Yeah.
So it had to be both. I don't think it would have been as popular if it was one or the other.
Yeah, if I was a kid and I saw that coming at me, that T-Rex, I'd be screaming. Like I would be, it would be authentic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I don't
definitely.
know how Spielberg did it that year because the same year he was. I mean, the big stress on Spielberg though that the year
Ah,
that Jurassic Park was Schindler's List
that's
because
right.
the subject matter of that film is so intense and the
Hmm.
story. When he was doing Jurassic Park, like he was so stressed out because he was trying to make Schindler's List, which was like,
Hmm.
and obviously he won the Oscar for Best Director for that, and
Hmm.
I mean, rightfully so, because that I only watched that for the first time a few months ago, and it was insane.
Oh
I
yeah,
thought,
yeah,
yeah, like to think that he had Jurassic Park and Schindler's List going on at the same time.
yeah,
Like
Hmm.
how that man did it, I
He's a
don't know.
powerhouse
And
director. Like,
yeah. Like the two completely different movies.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean that's really amazing. That's like one of the all-time like just like achievements there. Like to, I mean, of course, like it was like what Jurassic Park was like in post or whatever when he was doing that or whatever was going on. But like
Mhm.
it's still like yeah, like you said, it really is like it's two movies going on at the same time, both released the same year. That's nuts.
Yeah, it
it
really
was
is. And
crazy.
both
What a-
classics. Like he managed to make two movies at the same time that would both go on to be like, if I'm assuming so, critical and commercial successes. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy for one director to do that. But God,
Yeah,
he managed to
it
do
was
it.
crazy. There was I don't know if you saw that Steven Spielberg documentary, but while he was on the set of Jurassic Park, they said anytime he had downtime, he was sitting in a different room, just scratching his head with the Schindler's List like script, like just
Oh, yeah.
oh my god, like how am I? Do you know what I mean? So
Is this a like a documentary all about Spielberg?
yeah, it was like this whole thing about it,
Oh, cool.
documentary.
I gotta check that out. What's you know what it's called?
Uh, I can't remember the name, but if you
That's
Google
okay. I'll
it,
look it up. Yeah, yeah, I'll look it up later.
it'll come up right away. I'm gonna say it was on one. It was on one of the streaming services. So I think I can't remember which
Mhm.
one, but yeah,
Okay.
it was incredible to watch because it talked about like just everything, like from how he was this unknown director, did Jaws, you know what I mean? Like he was given that chance, and then leading up to what he's achieved today. It was just honestly like I was fist pumping by the end of this documentary.
Nice.
So,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
really
Cool.
Um,
awesome.
I want to go back really quickly to the Goosebumps TV show.
Mm-hmm.
So you had said that you only caught it recently. Have you had a chance to sort of check out any other episodes of the original TV?
Oh no, and even that was so long ago. I like never got around to it. I think maybe a few times I would like find it on streaming and put it on like in the background or something, but I never really like watched much of it. Unfortunately, I kind of just missed that whole thing.
Hmm. I would definitely recommend it because I know you did a Monster Madness review on Are You Afraid of the
Hmm.
Dark, which is, I mean, that
Oh
was
yeah.
a great show in and of itself. But Goosebumps was definitely, well, it's funny too because it's always being compared, Goosebumps
Hmm.
versus Are You Afraid of the Dark. Goosebumps was definitely more of the sort of sillier one. It definitely had its scary moments, but I feel like Dark sort of was better at sort of the scares, where Goosebumps was more of like the more funny, silly one, and that was by design, uh,
Hmm.
because they wanted to make it so it wasn't completely alienating to its target audience. Um, but it still did manage to get in some creepy stuff. I mean, we've talked about like what we consider the scariest episodes. But I would definitely recommend checking out definitely a few episodes, especially around Halloween time. The Haunted Mask, one
Yes.
and two, great
It's essentially
Halloween,
Oh cool.
one.
great ones. Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns is another Halloween one. That one's really fun.
Oh
Anything
cool.
slappy in it. Yeah,
Yeah.
You
there's a
want
ton of
the
really good ones.
episode Welcome to Dead House if you want like just creep factor. That's a good one.
Okay. Cool.
Any of the two-parters really that got released on VHS are
Yeah, Werewolf
they're-
Fever Swamp, one of my
Oh cool.
favorites.
yeah, Camp Nightmare's a really good one. Yeah, they're all fantastic. Those like two-part ones.
Oh nice.
Now, I will interject. There is one thing I found. It is a documentary called Spielberg, I do
That's it.
believe it's the only documentary that I found, but it is on Max.
Okay, awesome.
Spielberg.
So
It's just called Spielberg.
Cool. Okay, yeah, it's simple enough. Yep.
easy enough. Easy enough.
Remember. Oh,
Yeah.
easy enough to forget.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would definitely recommend the Goosebumps TV show. But you did say you caught the Jack Black movie. I would assume the first one at least. What did you end up thinking of that film?
Oh, I enjoyed it. Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. It was an interesting way to go about it, have him be R.L. Stine in a movie about Goosebumps. Like it was kind of cool.
Well,
That's the response to the Goosebumps movie is it was a fun movie. It was just like enjoyable fun.
definitely,
You know?
that's how I
Yeah.
feel about it. It's got a lot of problems narratively. And you know, sometimes it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I mean, sometimes you just need to get a whole bunch of weird and creepy monsters together and just have them run around and wreak havoc. And sometimes that's just all you need.
More practical.
I think I remember somebody equated it to being like Gremlins meets Jumanji, almost in a sense.
Ah.
But
I will say the first one, we've talked about it on here multiple times, but the first one is definitely more theatrical in its production value. Whereas the second one, we all kind of feels more like an actual Goosebumps story, if that makes sense. So we all enjoyed the second one, while it didn't get as great of reviews as the first one, though. But I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that Jack Black wasn't in it as a full-time character. He kind of came in at the end as a cameo appearance in a way. So
well,
it was like a Night of the Living Dummy episode. That's what a lot of people describe the second movie. It felt like just a Night of the Living Dummy episode.
Well, the funny thing about that, and we always point out the joke, is just like, Jack Black is in the movie, but he only comes in like at the end once everything's already like the villains are already defeated and everything, and he comes in and he's just like, "I'm here to help," and they're like, "We actually don't need you anymore, so like you can just go now." And he's like, "Okay."
it seems more like he ran on set by accident, filming another movie on a lot next door.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's how it actually happened. Like they were just rolling the camera, and he just came in from off camera, and they're like, okay, I guess he's here now."
I got 4 hours. What are we doing? I got 4 hours. What are we doing?
Oh man.
Okay.
I actually wanted to bring up really quick. We talked about this for those who tuned into our last episode, but we talked about this a little bit. There were actually planned Goosebumps movies in the 90s that did not get made, and two of them that we know about. One was supposed to be directed by Tim Burton in 1998, and that one fell apart because of legal disputes between Scholastic and the publishing company, Parachute Press. But there was also supposed to be one, and I wanted to bring this up with you here, James. George Romero was supposed to do a Goosebumps movie in 1995.
Wow.
Based on Welcome to Dead House. So, like, George Romero, he had done, the Dead trilogy, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn Day.
Creep Show.
Yeah, and he did Creep Show, which was a phenomenal movie. I went back and watched it.
Yeah.
But in the 90s, he wasn't doing a whole lot of movies in the 90s. He worked on the Night of the Living Dead remake, and he did a few other films. But he really wanted to do this movie because he said at the time his kid was like really into the Goosebumps books. So he ended up writing this whole like hardened message to, I believe, the vice president of Fox at the time, just being like expressing his gratitude and being considered for a movie, a Goosebumps movie. And being Welcome to Dead House, it's like, you get the master of zombie movies on your payroll to do a Goosebumps zombie movie. Such a shame it didn't come to pass. I don't even remember what exactly it was, but it was such a shame.
That's a tragedy right there. We're talking tragedy earlier. That is a
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
the king of zombie movies making.
Yeah. And I could see it being like with like the tone of Creep Show, how it's like really fun, like it's not like a real serious horror movie. I could see like in that kind of style a Goosebumps Romero film. That'd be great.
It would have been great. Yeah. Like I said, it's another shame. And Tim Burton too. I mean, like two really good directors. that you could have gotten for sort of the silly, fun, campy sort of horror movie, and especially Romero coming off a Creep show, like it was perfect. They had it right there, but wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
Uh,
Could have got both. Could have got both. We could have got George A. Romero's Goosebumps, and we could have also got Tim Burton's version. Like,
Oh man.
Yeah,
in a
that
perfect
would've been
world.
nice.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's a great story.
And I really wanted to bring up really quick. So going off of Goosebumps for a little bit, a little bit. Um, we always talk about how Goosebumps is sort of what we call gateway horror. So there's a lot of sort of things that as a kid you see that are geared towards you, movies, shows, cartoons that have that spooky edge. And even though some people might not be into like watching straight horror movies yet, it's what kind of tips them in the direction of going that way. Goosebumps we always considered was sort of that way, but there's many other shows that kind of have that. James, off the top of your head, is there anything that sort of fits that category that maybe you saw or maybe other people were watching at the time?
Oh, more like gateway horror.
Yeah.
Oh, let me see. I mean, I guess all like the cartoons, I guess, kind of had some kind of horror element. Inhumanoids comes to mind, but it was like that was such a short-lived cartoon, sadly. But it had like monsters and gore in it. Like it was pretty gross for what would normally be on TV, and it was Hasbro, so it was. I mean, it was a lot more intense than G.I. Joe and Transformers, but yeah. I guess my gateway horror really was like. I mean, as far as like getting into like real horror, like things that are actually horrific, would be like all the classic 30s and 40s monster movies, and then and all the 50s sci-fi alien invasion movies and science experiments gone wrong. I kind of generally watched horror movies in chronological order. Like I kind of like worked my way up from each era until I got to like slashers. So I would say everything was sort of a gateway to me.
Definitely. And if stuff for me, like what comes to my mind too is like I remember before Goosebumps, actually I was really into ScoobyDoo.
Oh yeah.
And the original
Me too.
ScoobyDoo, I don't think people really remember, but the original ScoobyDoo, the Hanna-Barbera one, actually was probably one of the creepier interpretations because you take a look at sort of the music in that show and the backgrounds and everything. It really set like sort of a creepy atmosphere, and it didn't need to show blood, it didn't need to show gore or anything. It was just pure creepy aura. And like as a kid, sometimes that's just like it can be creepy, but it can be fascinating. Like it's just fascinating to watch as a kid. Like you're scared, but you're intrigued in that sort of
Yeah.
but I'm glad you brought up
Yeah,
like,
Scooby-Doo was great. Yeah.
yeah, it was always a show that I would have to put on. My parents were no doubt sick of it because I watched it so much. I'm glad you brought up the Universal monster movies, though. I know that those definitely had a major impact on you specifically, and what most likely led to stuff like Monster Madness. And I wanted to bring up Monster Vision.
Yeah.
I do remember seeing your video on that, and I was intrigued. In fact, after I had saw it, I was able to actually find some recordings of Monster Vision on YouTube. So, unfortunately, nothing from the pre-Joe Bob era. But I did enjoy seeing Joe Bob Briggs and sort of his commentary on movies back then. But you did a whole video on Monster Vision.
Funny
Yeah.
enough, Joe Bob is actually coming in because we actually have an outdoor cinema still. So
Oh, cool.
Skyline. So we have a Skyline driving, and funny enough, him and Darcy are both coming here. And I never thought in
nice.
a million years that would happen in my little town.
Oh,
So,
that's awesome. Cool.
Thought that was
Yeah,
pretty amazing.
yeah. No, they've been busy bringing the last drive-in to actual drive-ins, and and he also has his His How Redneck Saved Hollywood show. That one's really great too. He's very, very, very knowledgeable. Just runs endlessly, like all his film history that he talks about, and in such a funny and entertaining way too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm stoked. I'm really hoping that I can actually attend this, like it because I'm so busy in October, and then I just found out about this maybe like a week ago. I don't know if that's just how recent his booking was, but that and just the fact that he's been carrying the torch of horror for so long. His resurgence, as a matter of fact, when you talk about Goosebumps resurgence, he had one too, uh, which is very nice, and he's I think finally starting to get more recognition. I think that he deserves, and he accumulates all that.
Yeah,
Darcy, but I mean, like it takes both of them to do that show. I think they're a good pairing.
yeah, for sure.
And
I
when
remember, like in that Monster Vision video, I said I hope that in some shape or form Monster Vision will come back. That video was a while ago too. I think that was like I'm going to say like 2010 maybe. And it wasn't a very long video or anything. It wasn't like super substantial, but I, basically covered like just the short history of Monster Vision. And I remember leaving it at that. Like I hope it'll return someday. It sure as hell did. Like, I mean, because the last drive-in was like everything you always wanted with Monster Vision. Because now it's on a streaming service on Shudder. They don't have the commercials to deal with. They don't have to censor the movies. It's in HD. The movies never looked better. It's kind of just like the best possible version of Monster Vision.
Mm-hmm. Well, and
Exactly.
it was always just incredible because I remember that video, and it's just always fun, even before Joe Bob came in, like just the way that Monster Vision was presented on TNT, and it was just like you had the narrator being like, I remember you were like, it wasn't Monster Vision, it was Monster Vision.
That's right, yeah.
And just like I don't know, like it was so cool back then. That was like the 80s, 90s, just a way to watch the classic horror films from the 30s, 40s, and then the sci-fi movies from the 50s and 60s. Like even today, like just the reintroduction of old movies from back then, that maybe some people would never even know about, like just getting reintroduced so like they live on forever.
Yeah. I actually have a video coming out that revisits this topic, but it's coming out soon enough. I'll just tell you what it is. It's about AMC's Monsterfest 99. So it's a 25th anniversary of what I remember as the last great horror marathon that I was there for, at least the one that I was there and I taped. There was a Monster Vision that same weekend. I taped a lot of it. I still have like a stack of VHS tapes from that one weekend, and it's like 5 or 6 tapes. But Roger Corman hosted it, so that's how it fits into the theme of this month. We're honoring, the memory of Roger Corman. I might as well plug coming up, or no, it'll be out by now, I think. I did the entire Edgar Allan Poe series that Roger Corman directed in one video. So it's like the longest video of the month. It's like 35 minutes or something. So it was huge. Yeah. Like I was like, you know what? If I'm going to do one of the Poe movies, I got to do them all. I could not pick a single one. So there I go. It's the whole thing. But I think you'll really like the AMC Monsterfest one. The movie is The Phantom Eye because it was a bonus movie that went along with the marathon. It was basically like a hyped as a Roger Corman film, and it aired in like 35 parts in between all the other movies that were showing. So it was like serialized, and at the end they rebroadcast it in its entirety. But yeah, like there was this cool, like you don't do that kind of thing nowadays. Like you don't see that kind of thing. TV just ain't the same anymore.
No, and even when you do catch horror movies on TV, like the one that comes to my mind, and for a while I watched it, was speaking of AMC, Fear Fest, which is sort of like their modern horror thing they do on Halloween. But even then, like they won't show like really like anything past like the 80s. And even then, a lot of that stuff has to be trimmed down because of TV censors. So, like, it's not the same as I think you even said in your Monster Vision video, like, by the time they were getting to like showing Friday the 13th and stuff like that, it was still like not the same as just watching the uncut movie.
Yeah.
Which is a shame, but I mean, what are you
You know,
gonna
you know, it
do?
was really funny too. They actually did Last Drive-In on AMC. I think it was like last week or so. I tuned in for some of it in the middle of Friday the 13th Part 2, and it was such a flashback because I remember watching my first time ever watching all the Friday the 13th was on TNT's Monster Vision. Now it's basically the same format on AMC, but he's doing it now, and they still have the commercials because it's cable, and they have the like they censor some of the kills and everything, and it's just funny how like certain things never change. But in a way, I just love that because it felt exactly like it was back then.
Exactly. You
Yep.
just had to have Joe Bob when they come back to him from commercial being like, "Oh, the AMC censors cut out that again."
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I mean, you brought up the Friday the 13th on just when he did the whole marathon, and like as the night went on, he just got progressively more pissed off with the censors. They couldn't even show part 4, and he's just like, "Where is part 4? Like, how can it be missing?"
And then they follow him backstage, like the cameras are just following him, and he's like back in the editing room or wherever, and he's like yelling at everybody.
Yeah, it's so funny.
Which was the one that had which Friday the 13th was it that had the iconic Crispin Glover dance?
Oh, that
Part
was 4. Yeah, that was the one that they that TNT couldn't
was.
show that time. Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's way more than that. I was like,
Yeah. Apparently he was dancing to Back in Black, but they use that as just like, they didn't know what song they were going to get the rights to, so they just had him dance to anything that he could. And then later on, I guess I don't even know the name of the song that they ended up using, but
it certainly doesn't match.
no, it doesn't match anything. It doesn't matter. Like even somebody tried to sync it with Back in Black so it looks like what he's really dancing to. Even then, it's like it's too questionable.
Yeah, it is a little over the top. I gotta check that out. I never knew about that. Though I guess you could find anything on YouTube these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and just going back to it, it's just again, it's so cool that they're doing, Last Drive-In now because you're right. And I remember when they first announced that, and it was just like that is so cool that they're like, even though it's on streaming, so you can't do like commercials and anything, it's not like 100% authentic. It's like they're still trying to keep that sort of spirit alive. And 80s, 90s nostalgia is super high right now. So it's like it was honestly nowadays it's like, oh, no wonder they brought it back because it's like they had to.
Yeah.
But and you got to meet Joe Bob on multiple occasions. I gotta ask you, how was that?
Oh, he was awesome. Yeah, I mean it's so much fun. Like even off camera, talking to him about movies and stuff, and just having his commentary on like everything. It's just, yeah, he's totally great. A lot of fun.
Yeah, he just seems like a super like funny guy to just hang around with. He just
Yeah.
like speaking his mind on things, and he's awesome. I totally understand.
Yeah.
Now, getting back to sort of like the area of like horror that Goosebumps subsided in, sort of like the more campy horror side, but also the horror anthology. We mentioned Are You Afraid of the Dark? But I also have to give quick mention to other horror anthologies, namely Twilight Zone and Tales from the Crypt. And definitely Tales from the Crypt, especially because the original comics were one of R.L. Stein's biggest inspirations for Goosebumps. And he cited it as so, it just sort of the grotesque situations, obviously geared down for kids, mixed with sort of the humor that, like, say, the Crypt Keeper would give. So it is really fun, and also the twists. Like, he always equated that, like, the twists in Goosebumps are very reminiscent of, like, sort of the comeuppance stuff at the end of Tales from the Crypt comics and Vault of Horror sort of stuff. Did you ever get a chance to read any Tales from the Crypt comics?
Not a lot. I have some of them, I think. I have this like EC Comics like box set. But no, I haven't read a lot of them. I've always wanted to, though.
Yeah, I have they do have the box set ones. They recently came out with a new printing, which is like a soft cover. But I actually have one, and I'm kind of kicking myself because I haven't had a chance to read it yet. But I really want to because I love the TV show. And the TV show is just, man, I can't believe that it was on HBO, so you weren't confined to cable, so they can get away with gore and sex and stuff like that. It's just still incredible to watch that and just be like, wow, I can't. This looks better. I remember I said like this looks better than some of the movies that were coming out at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like great special effects. I couldn't believe it. But
Yeah.
what was your thoughts on the TV show?
Oh, yeah, I loved it. I feel like now I want to rewatch my video. I did a video, top 10 Tales from the Crypt episodes, and I don't remember what my picks were, so I have to watch the video again. But I do remember the one. Oh yeah, like
I was gonna say there was like
yeah.
the ventriloquist dummy. I know was one of them. Strung Along, Yellow, the one with Dan Aykroyd, Kirk Douglas. Those ones, they're all really good episodes.
Oh, that the one where the war one where he's like the coward and like yeah. I'd ruin the episode. Less said, the better. But one that stuck out to me a lot was the gambling one where the two guys are like gambling with each other. They end up chopping off like fingers, and it keeps escalating. And it's just the acting, like the way they look at each other with so much hatred, that it's just like you can just see the hate just dripping off the screen. These guys hate each other so much, to like comical proportions.
Oh, they do like the Russian roulette, and like one of them is like literally going to get killed, but it's a dud bullet. And instead of being thankful that he's alive, he's more pissed off that the other guy, could have lived. So it's
exactly, yeah.
And then I think like one of them, I know Lance Hendrickson played sort of like the cowboy, so he's got like the rustic country accent, and he's got like the big cowboy hat on, and when it comes time for him to like have one of his fingers chopped off, he's just like, I should have gone for that flush. He's like, I'll make a deal with you, I'll give you back one of your fingers, and he's like, no way.
No. He's so excited.
One of my favorites is the one with Morton Downey Jr., the television terror one, I'm pretty sure it was called. That was like sort of one of the first precursors to found footage, because it was a video crew going into a haunted house.
Okay.
But I love that episode because it wastes no time. Like, it's not one of those things where it's like, he sees something and no one believes him. I think they do that one time, but like by the time they get in, like weird shit's already happening. Like there's like chandeliers falling from the ceiling. There's like visions of people. There's like a vision of one guy in a bathtub with his throat like slit, and he's just like, oh, like come here, like you gotta see it. And no, I just love Tales from the Crypt. I can go on and on, but I did have to bring it up really quick because
one that stuck with me way back when I was a kid watching it was the Joe Pesci, I believe it too, was in it. The episode with the twins. And
okay, yeah.
The ending to that one was like so messed up, and as a kid, that always stuck with me. That visual of like the split screen, so you had each sister in their bed with half of him. And I'm just like, that is so messed up.
Yeah.
And just Pesci in general, like he's just hilarious in that episode. One scene that ended up becoming a meme is where he like shows up to their house and he just walks up and he takes his glasses off. He's just like, what the fuck is this piece of shit?
That's a great line though. I'm not the way he delivered it. I can see why it's a meme.
Yeah.
I use that even for part of the new Goosebumps Disney Plus show. With the haunted mask.
Yeah, I remember that. It was just the new haunted mask. And just like, what the fuck is this piece of shit?
You weren't happy about that.
Oh god, no! I had to use that for that particular one, and it fit perfectly.
Yeah.
But man, when you look back on Tales from the Crypt, like when we talk about all the different actors that like Dan Aykroyd and Joe Pesci, they had a pretty star-powered lineup in some episodes, really,
Yeah.
for a horror TV show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was almost like a badge of it seemed like it became almost like a badge of honor to like be on Tales from the Crypt.
Yeah, it became one of those things. Like nobody was ashamed to do like something that was horror. Everybody was like into it, you know. Yeah, yeah, it was a really star-studded cast.
And then you had like episodes directed by like Michael J. Fox and Tom Hanks
Yeah,
and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
we had
Have him next to the Crypt Keeper being like, like keep working out while I tell the story.
yeah,
So good.
yeah, good old Arnold.
Oh man.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, that was a pretty good one too. It was the Switch, I think.
Yeah, it was the old man who wanted to become younger so he can get a girl, but then the girl's like, like she's just kind of like, you know what I really want, but she ends up getting together with the young man he traded with because he's got all this money now.
Yeah.
Oh, I've given away the ending.
It's one of those shows.
These
like,
are old enough. I feel like
Yeah,
it's fine.
it's a show where you honestly the ending's always like the best part. It's like if you gotta talk about the script, you gotta talk.
Yeah, like a lot of times the fun is just like, ooh, how's this one gonna end?
Well, and the funny thing too is that you have the Crypt Keeper, and he's like one of the best horror hosts ever. Is like right next to Elvira, I would think, is like the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
And he can still do John Cassier. Yeah, definitely. And John Cassier does the voice. He can still do it. Like he's still going to cons and like doing the whole like Crypt Keeper voice, and it's crazy.
Yeah, I was once at a con with him. Like I was at the same con. I remember he was just kind of just walking around, and he would just do the voice every now and then. Like he's, he's still got it, and he still loves doing it.
And it always just kind of irks me that they don't do a revival. We got the Creep Show revival, which I was shocked as good as it is. Like
that's really good. Yeah.
And it doesn't shy away from the gore. It's like it is dripping with blood and guts. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But man,
that is one show I watched all the way through.
It's like what a relief that we still get shows like that just sort of like, they don't go for nothing serious. Everything is just like, let's see how far we can go with the campiness and the blood and the sort of the gratuitous nature of it. So see stuff like that still happening. And speaking of which, my next question is, you've watched hundreds of horror movies now, whether for Monster Madness or just as a horror fan. What would you say, how do you feel about sort of like that more campy, goofy tone in certain horror movies?
Which ones in particular?
I mean, my mind goes to stuff like I'm thinking like Killer Clowns from Outer Space and like stuff that really is just like it's super unserious, but it's like it's sort of like turn your brain off kind of fun.
Oh yeah, no, I always love that too. Yeah, I think of some other examples for you.
Night of the Demons, I'm thinking like is one.
Yeah.
That's another really fun one. And Return of the Living Dead is one of my favorite zombie movies of all time.
That's a really good example, yeah, because that movie is kind of funny. It's very dark, but it's a very dark and hopeless movie, but it is very funny too.
Yeah, and then the sequel, the second one in particular, is not as good. I will say that, but it's sort of like it's almost like a soft remake. Almost, it's one of those things where they call it a 2, but it's basically the same plot.
Yeah, because they have the same two guys in it that aren't the same two guys. I don't.
Yeah, James Caan, James Karen and Tom Matthews. They play essentially the same characters from the first movie. Instead, this time they're grave robbers, and they meet the same fate. So it's like they're doing the same movie, but it's a little more like campiness. It goes a little more for like sort of the silly nature. They're like bumping zombies on the head. There's one where like a jaw gets ripped off, and he's like, ah. It's stuff like that. It's like you got horror movies that are very creepy, very like you feel like uncomfortable in a good way watching
Hmm.
them, but then you have ones where you're just like, oh my gosh, that looks like ridiculous and that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
Return of the Living Dead is one of those ones because you just have like the comedy.
definitely.
Yeah, but it's so good.
You know
The
what? I
comedy
would
is in
say,
it is.
yeah, here's what you do. Like, here would be my recommendation for the listeners. You want some really fun zombie movies like that? It's a four-parter. It would be you got Dawn of the Dead, Return of the Living Dead, Brain Dead, also known as Dead Alive, and then fuck, which did I say Return of the Living Dead already?
Return of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Brain Dead.
Evil Dead 2, that's the other one.
Yes,
There you
Evil
go.
Dead 2. That is like the
Yeah.
king of that sort of subgenre is Evil Dead 2.
Yeah, and they're all like technically zombies, but it's completely different. So, Dawn of the Dead, you'd have the kind that eat your flesh, and then Return of the Living Dead, it's the kind that eat your brains. Then Evil Dead 2 is the kind that swallow your soul, and then what's that leave us with?
Brain Dead's just like
Brain Dead, the
the
kind
ones that squirt blood the most.
yeah, the kind that eat you up and barf you out.
I can't for the Lord. Oh God, I love that.
Yeah,
That
so
movie.
there's a quadruple dead feature that's sure to get you lots of laughs and also good scares and atmosphere as well.
Definitely. Well, Dawn of the Dead especially is like I would say undeniably Dawn of the Dead is like one of the best, if not the best zombie movie of all time. Like
Yeah,
objectively, it's a great commentary. It does have those moments of comedic levity, but it's also just horrifying. Like it really is. You really got to imagine like Romero's zombie
yeah,
universe in particular is just so hopeless. Like
yeah, yeah,
there's no coming back from any of it. There's never going to be a sense of normalcy. And the great thing about those movies and would be carried by The Walking Dead when that came on was that it focuses on the people. Like the zombies are there, but like you're more focused on
Right.
sort of like how humans are causing their own downfall,
yeah, yeah.
how they have to work together, and sometimes they can, but most times they don't. The first Night of the Living Dead in particular, the characters do nothing but fight.
Yeah, and then by the time you get to Day of the Dead, they're so insane that it's like most of them are just, you dumb fucks. It's all just like,
They're pointing
They're-
guns at each other, and it was
yeah,
like,
they're all going
"Ooh,
nuts.
I was kill you if you didn't get back in your chair."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You could make a case for any of those, like the first three Dead movies. Like you can make a case for any one of those being the best. Like, Night of the Living Dead has its own thing. Like it's the first one. Dawn of the Dead. I mean, you could totally say that's the best too. And then Day of the Dead also. Like that one has its own thing going. So sometimes I can't even decide, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a really good horror trilogy. One of the personally, I would say one of the best. Among with like God, I was gonna give some examples, but then they just left my mind.
Frankenstein trilogy.
Frankenstein. Yep, that's a
Yeah.
good one. The first one, Bride and Son.
Yeah, and that's another one where I can't decide between the original Bride or Son, like which one's the best, because I change my mind all the time. It's one of those things.
Definitely. I was gonna say Alien, but then I remembered Alien 3 as a movie, and yeah.
Yeah, it's got a good ending, but yeah, no, Alien 3 is definitely the more polarizing one, like where there's good and bad about it. But generally, no, it's not. It's nowhere near as good as Alien and
I-
Aliens. Yeah.
I have my trilogy of aliens. You watch Alien Romulus, Aliens, and then that's it, right? Because Alien Romulus is set just after the first one. The new
Oh yeah,
one
I didn't
came.
get to see Romulus yet, but I'm gonna watch it sometime soon if when it's out on streaming, if it's not already.
It was what I call. It's in my top three now. Like it's Alien, and then Romulus is probably my third favorite now.
Oh,
Because that
cool.
one just felt like it was part of that world from the first like three.
Yeah,
everything-
yeah. That's the impression I got from the trailers. It looked like even if it's not, up to those standards, it's still like it looks like they really tried.
They did.
Definitely.
They tried.
I felt the same way with whether or not you feel the same way about, its sequels. I felt the same way about Halloween 2018.
Oh yeah.
I remember going to see that movie and I just walked out. I was like, that was a really good movie. Like it
Oh,
just
cool.
felt like a really good conclusion. I personally liked Kills,
Mhm.
more just because I love the kills in Halloween Kills. They really went for sort of like the just how gory they could take it. And then ends. I saw
Yeah.
what they were trying to do with that movie, but I don't hate it, but I certainly don't like it.
I do.
Mhm.
I will not watch Ends ever again. And my daughter and I, when we saw it in theaters, we were like, "What the fuck is this?" I thought we came to watch Halloween.
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
Yeah, I
You know,
saw it
you know,
once as
you know what
well.
the crazy part is? Like, if that movie could have just been its own thing, like not related to the first two, and
Yeah.
just had Corey Cunningham's character, that
Mhm.
okay, I could have got behind that film, honestly.
Mhm.
But it's supposed to be the end of that trilogy with Michael Myers,
Yeah,
and
and
it
they
just
build it as like
railed so much.
It was advertised like that. It was like they
Yeah.
The
didn't
fact
show
where
Corey
he
at
got
all.
punked, he got punked by that kid throughout
Yeah,
the whole movie until the end. He
Yeah.
was like, "I just had enough of this, snap." It's like, well, too late now. Like, dude punked you, stole your mask, and left you
Yeah.
sitting there without a mask, crying in the sewer, bro. Like, what is
Yeah,
happening?
exactly.
Yeah, Michael Myers spent 5 years like just chilling in a sewer for some reason. Like it's just
Weird.
so
Like,
Yeah, yeah.
odd.
especially how awesome the ending of Kills was. You're like, okay, the beginning of the next one's got to be like epic because
Yeah.
he just like killed Karen, and like he's just standing in his house all bloodied up after he just slaughtered all those other people, town villagers, the mob, and he's a badass.
I will say I
Yeah.
did like the opening
Then ends
tense. Like the
So it's like,
the pre-credits scene where like we see Corey babysitting that kid, a little shithead kid, and essentially causing his death accidentally, but it looks like he killed him. I thought that was a really good scene. It was really well shot. I won't deny that those movies are really well put together in terms of like cinematography and stuff like that. I just think the writing needs a bit more
See,
tinkering.
2018 was probably the best written. Kills had some stuff I feel they definitely could have taken out, specifically that mental patient scene at the hospital
Yeah,
with
yeah.
everybody. I
Mhm.
feel like that was just dragged on, and it
I
really
never wanted
just
to hear "Evil Dies
really
Tonight."
gave nothing. If you fast forward through all that part, that the movie's much better. Out of the three, I actually really prefer Kills because, like you said, I really like the kills in that. But Michael was just more vicious in that one too. It was a different. I felt like a different side of Michael we really hadn't seen. 2018 tried to kind of get you there, but because they had to build those other characters and kind of give you this new story, it didn't quite hit that mark until Kills happened. But you knew the shit was going to hit the fan when that firefighter scene happened, which was incredible. Like, never in a million years would I think, oh yeah, Michael's just going to go on a rampage killing a whole bunch of firefighters.
I'm glad that Michael
Sure
is
enough.
carrying on the tradition of Hollywood slashers because there hasn't been another Jason or Freddy movie in over a decade now, which is sad. And in fact, recently Robert
Yeah.
Englund
That's
said
all
that he
legal
can't
stuff,
do it
though, isn't
anymore.
it?
Friday the 13th, I believe, is having, but I believe they've been resolved, so they're trying to
The
get
Friday the 13th one, I think, is resolved, but I think Nightmare on Elm Street has a legal thing going on.
Does
still.
it?
You know what would have
If
been
I,
a
if I
perfect?
heard right, that's why they also haven't done anything with it.
Yeah.
And that's actually that's why Trick or Treat Studios, when they started doing the Nightmare on Elm Street line, they could only do certain things like prior to a certain date. Like they can't make anything new, like say from Freddy versus Jason or I think even past a certain Friday or Nightmare on Elm Street, if I'm not mistaken. That's why I think they only did up to 4 stuff from all the way up to 4. Even the Dawn Post mask, like they're only able to do that and the Friday the 13th one because they bought Dawn Post and that's still part of Dawn Post Studios. That's why they can produce that, but they can't do anything new. That's why you don't see any new Friday the 13th merch or anything like that. which just sucks because honestly, like that 2009 remake with Derek Mears was phenomenal. I really enjoyed that version of
did too.
Jason and Friday the 13th.
Oh, I thought it was okay, but have you guys seen In a Violent Nature?
Yes.
I need to. It's still on my list to watch.
I was thinking, like, when I was watching, I was like, you know what? This would be perfect as a Friday the 13th movie. Like, it would be a different way to do it because, like, you know, if they're, I can't think of any series where they've taken the character through so many changes. You know, where where he becomes like zombie Jason, then he becomes like this spirit that's going into people's bodies, then he becomes like outer space, like then he's like a cyborg in space. So like they've done so many things with it. It's like, well, what do they do? What would they do next? And I was like, well, that's a really cool way to do it. Like, it's because In a Violent Nature is basically like your traditional slasher movie, but just done in a totally fresh kind of way. I didn't think it was perfect. Like I didn't love every single thing about it, but I really liked the idea of just following the killer around, and like the kills were insane. It's like there's some kills in there where I'm like, wow, never seen that one before. That was pretty good. But like the shot choices were really great. Just the places where they'd put the camera, where they would always be giving you some kind of information that you just get by looking instead of people explaining stuff all the time. I mean, they do have the traditional, like, sit around the campfire, tell the story thing. And, it does seem like it could have been a Friday the 13th reboot of some kind. So yeah, it is a shame that that's been locked up for so long.
Yeah.
And I know they tried to reboot Nightmare on Elm Street that one time, and it didn't go over very well. So
yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, and now
it wasn't so much like Jackie Earle Haley did a bad job. It was just it was big shoes to fill, but I think what killed it for a lot of people was his design for his burns and everything. He kind of looked too derpy.
It relied on CG too much too, because it kind of ruined things like coming out of the wall. Like in the original movie, that was done through specific filming and lighting techniques. In the remake, it's just CGI and not even good CGI. So it's just kind of one of those things. And also, like you said, James, like just bringing it in a new direction, because the slasher genre has been going on since the 80s, even the 70s. And it's become so stagnant that like you just need to find new ways to reinvent it. And In a Violent Nature is one of them. I also think of like, what's one that comes to mind? I think like, weird example, but the movie Freaky is kind of an interesting concept because it's combining.
Is that the one with Vince Vaughn?
Yeah, it's the one.
It's pretty good. Yeah,
it's a really fun movie, and it's an interesting concept because it's the killer and the final girl. They swap bodies, so she's in the killer's body, and they have to like find a way to stop the killer from murdering other people. So it's like those ways to like freshen it up and make it something new is very needed in the horror genre. And you still get things nowadays, especially nowadays. Independent filmmakers are coming out and they're making their own horror movies and making new names in the horror community. And streaming makes it so that more content can come out. It doesn't have to be in a movie theater. So it's a very different time for horror. It is a good time to like sort of do new things with it.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I don't know. I hope,
especially with how big horror's gotten. I mean, really, horror's really blown up the last probably 10 years, I'd have to say. More and more conventions are happening, plugging us right here, right now for the future. But at the same time, I mean, it really has. Like, it's been more accepting by people. And I know everything goes through waves. There was a time where horror genre was pretty much dead. But this whole revitalization, you're getting more Scream movies, whether good or bad. It's a preference, of course. I like where they went with the new ones, kind of making fun of themselves. But it's really good to see it happening, but it's really sad not to see Jason or Freddy, these kind of big icons of horror. Even Leatherface. As much I like the one that Jessica Biel was in, I thought that was a really great Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Arlie
But the
Ermey was
Netflix
awesome.
one, yes, he was
Yeah.
so good.
It's so funny, like how the Texas Chainsaw movies, Leatherface is not like the best villain in them because it's always like one of the family members, and
Yeah.
Arlie Ermey is probably like one of the best examples of that because that guy is freaky in the remake.
But so funny, like scary and funny. That he had,
Yeah.
for a drill sergeant, he had a great acting prowess.
Yeah, like I won't forget the
There
scene.
was nothing that he wasn't in that I hated.
I won't forget the scene.
Like
in
Bjorn and I, we love Saving Silverman, and he had a great role in that too.
Oh yeah.
I won't forget the
Saving
scene in the
Silverman.
remake of Texas Chainsaw where he's sitting like the one guy down in the car and he's like, I want you to show me how that girl killed herself. And he gives him the gun. And he's like, put it in your mouth and pull the trigger. It's like, he does.
I am so glad that you guys know that scene and you guys know that movie because like every time when that ever comes up with anybody, the Texas Chainsaw remake, I mean before there was like tons of remakes, but like that one they were like, oh yeah, that's just trash, that's garbage. I'm like, but did you see Arlie Ermey? Did you see how good he was in that movie?
Exactly. And there's a charm to the original Texas Chainsaw where it's like it's thrown to that grindhouse, like gritty, almost found footage sort of thing, but not really. It's not like activity. But it's almost like you watch it and you're like, this could be real. Like that's the sort of feeling you get. The remake doesn't do that, but that's not it. That doesn't mean that it's a bad movie. It's still
They
grindy.
kind of did. They tried to give you that
a little bit.
Like the beginning of the film started kind of like that, but the end of the film did that too. It was like, talking about how this
creepy.
footage was from the
that
house
movie
and,
had a creepy
that
ending.
was that was a great ending.
Yeah, you just had like the shots of you had the police crew going into the basement and they get ambushed by Leatherface, and then it just ends on like the photographs of him in the dark.
Shot.
That's creepy. I actually wanted to quickly bring up going back to the gateway horror discussion really quick. I can't believe these didn't pop into my mind. Stuff like not really
Scared Stupid
horror movies, but like Beetlejuice and Gremlins and Ghostbusters, like those movies are like have that spooky element to them, but are not straight up horror. So you could watch them when you're a kid. Hopefully, your kid doesn't ask about the the scene in Ghostbusters with Dan Aykroyd and the ghost. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do know what you're talking about.
Pants, levitating bed.
Yeah.
But
you
and
should say like
Poltergeist.
Joe Bob, if you know what I mean. If you know what I mean, and I think you do.
Yes, that was the one. It took me a second to remember too. I was like, but movies like even Poltergeist, like that's a movie that is technically rated PG, but that movie has skeletons coming out of the pool and a guy ripping his own face off. Like,
yeah, the face part was crazy. There's the clown, there's like the tree coming in through the window and all that, and like, yeah. I mean, it's definitely not like a ghost movie. It's more like there's nothing subtle about it, but that's what I like about Poltergeist because I'm typically not into the ghost genre as much because it's a little too abstract for me. But Poltergeist is a totally different breed, and like I always loved it, just how insane it is.
Mm-hmm. And even like as I said, like Beetlejuice and stuff like that, and like it's more silly, but it's got a lot of that sort of like weird Tim Burton style that like really reels. Tim Burton was always like the master of sort of that gateway horror, with that and Corpse Bride and Nightmare Before Christmas and stuff like that. He just had these amazing designs for things in his movies. And recently, we were talking earlier about like practical effects versus CG. And it's so good to hear that, practical effects were mostly used in the Beetlejuice sequel. From what I've heard, there wasn't much CG where there didn't need to be. So,
Yeah, that's how it seemed. Yeah.
I mean, it's the way it should be, and if I had it my way, CG would only be used when it needed to be, and not all the time. It kind of seems like we're getting back to that spot. I think people are kind of CG'd out at this point.
Yeah, yeah. Like to use it more wisely.
It's a little more. People can.
Well, when you
spot
get
it.
stuff that today is garbage because of CG, like the Flash movie that Michael Keaton was in, the CGI, that was just atrocious. I mean, there was literally stuff from 90s television that was using CGI. For instance, we talked about Goosebumps, the 90s TV series had, I think, better CGI than that film did. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy in this day and age for a multi-million-dollar movie to have that kind of CGI in it compared to a 90s kids show.
Another question for you, James. We've been talking about all these different aspects of horror. You mean you've watched so many horror movies and done so many reviews. What would you say are like the best aspects of a good horror movie? Like the best aspects in terms of storytelling?
Yeah, just the suspense, really good acting, great cinematography. Yeah, like all those things.
I agree, very much so. And
Beginning, the middle, and the twist.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and the best horror movies are the ones that really, I mean, we love the schlocky stuff, but some of the best horror movies are the ones that like sometimes aren't even like fully meant to scare you. Like I think of some of my absolute favorite horror movies of all time. One that comes to mind is like The Thing. The obviously the remake, it's a classic. That's a movie that like is so suspenseful at every single turn, in that when it gets to like the really like super scary stuff, it hits you even harder because you're like just on the edge of your seat. And I remember the blood testing. Like that whole scene is a masterclass in suspense, and then just boom, there it goes. Like it's not like there's no, as you call them, like there's no fake scares like or anything. It's just pure like something happens. We're on an adrenaline rush. There's a monster in the room.
So that's going to lead into a question I'm going to have for every single one of you. The end of that film, because Bjorn, you've seen it, right? You've seen John Carpenter's The Thing.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So the ending, do you think one of them isn't actually who they are?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I never really thought of it that way.
Yeah,
I think I just assumed that they were both just kind of doomed.
yeah, like they're just they're left without
Because
a face.
apparently there's an answer out there, but it's so divided still.
Huh.
Like
Wow.
you don't know if McCready is who he is, and I do believe he is. But I can't. I'm blanking on the name. Who is the other guy with him at the end?
Oh man, let's see. It's that time
I'm
of night where
blanking on his name.
my brain is mush.
No, I can't remember either. But I know what you're saying. It's like you're kind of left with,
Supposedly, some people think it's him though. Like, but then I go back and look because they say you can't see his breath.
Okay.
But I thought maybe in one of those scenes I did see, so it's kind of like I don't know. See, it's still really thrown up, but it's very divisive. But I personally think, that McCready's the only one left that is still human.
Well, and also there's The Fly with Jeff Goldblum, which I think is that and The Thing are like some of the best remakes of all time. I wouldn't even say remakes, best remakes of all time, but The Fly is so disgusting and grotesque. Like it's so funny whenever I show that movie to someone for the first time and I just watch their reaction to certain scenes. It's just like honestly, that's as entertaining as watching the movie. But that movie is almost like a tragedy. Like by the end of the movie, Jeff Goldblum's character is so disgusting and contorted. Like at this point, he's literally like become the machine. He's just got like machine parts growing out of him, and he just puts the gun on his head. There's no words. It's just it's just his girlfriend crying, blows his head off, and that's how the movie ends. Like, there's no happy ending, there's no resolution. It's just
Yeah.
that's it. Um, it's just those grandeur pieces of storytelling that really make for good horror or just like good suspense. Alfred Hitchcock was a masterclass at suspense.
Hmm.
Um, Definitely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Child was the other person. I had to look it up. It was
Okay.
driving me crazy.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of your favorite horror movies, James?
Oh, let's see. I always give the same kind of answer. I know. I think my number one might be Night of the Living Dead. If I had to, well, actually, you know what? That's tough because then I think maybe Jaws, because Jaws is like a lot of times I kind of forget that's a horror movie, but it is. It's like totally a horror movie. Um, so like that might be my number one. But when I think horror movie, I think more like Night of the Living Dead because it's black and white, but it's kind of modern as well. It sort of has like old tropes, but it has newer tropes that it's set as well. Like any zombie movie today, everything is all from Night of the Living Dead. I like it that it's like a little bit cheesy, but it's not too cheesy, and it has like that, that serious, where like the people are the monsters in it, and like they're all fighting with each other, they can't get along. I think like it has more depth than a lot of other monster movies.
Hmm. It goes back to, sort of you're focused on like the human connections in that moment. The zombies are like the outside force. The main conflict is really going on between the characters because their actions can lead to whether or not they live or they die. Um, in that sort of
Yeah.
sense. So I completely agree 100%.
Hmm.
Well, I guess I got one more question before we end off the night, and I'm gonna bring it all back to Goosebumps. Um, but sort of like how we've been talking about today, horror is booming. Like it's
Hmm.
horror always has like those phases where it goes in and out. Like I would say for a while, you had uh like the 2000s was kind of like a little barren for horror movies. Not many memorable ones were coming out. But then you got to like the 2010s and now, and especially with streaming, like it's just booming. But it works the same way for those aforementioned sort of like kids horror and Goosebumps, especially as we mentioned, Goosebumps is still going strong. The new books are still coming out, and new readers are, um, you know, becoming attached to it, and some will
Hmm.
probably become attached to horror. How do you feel about like just the fact that like just new generations of people are growing into horror because of stuff like Goosebumps?
I think it's so awesome. Like I wouldn't have expected it. Uh, what's really cool in that documentary that you sent me, I know R.L. Stine, he says like how he still really enjoys doing it. He's like, there's nothing better than just getting to your computer in the morning with a cup of coffee and just writing stuff. And I'm like, fuck yeah, that's exactly how I feel too. Like I just love doing what I do. And it's very easy to look at something and be like, well, that's been going on for so long. Like you must be tired of it by now. And just to hear him say like, no, I'm not. I just love doing it. That's exactly how I feel. Like I love what I do, and I just never want to stop. I love what I do. What can you say?
You're passionate,
Absolutely. And
passionate about.
it leads to like inspiration for others to want to do their own thing. I can remember, Goosebumps made me not only want to continue reading, but like write. Like it made me want to write my own stories because I was so inspired
Hmm.
to do
Yeah.
so. And, just for me, it's just so cool to see like kids nowadays. I remember like uh, when we met R.L. Stein last October, we went to this little like pop convention, and
Oh, cool.
I was standing in line, and there was like I just will never forget it. It was so adorable. There was like a little girl right behind me, and she was like talking with her parents, and she had like a little beat up copy of like Piano Lessons Can Be Murder. Uh, and I turned around, I was like, "Oh, is that your favorite book?" And she's like, "Yeah, I really like this book. Like, I really want to read more of them." I'm like, "Oh, that's cute." So it's like it's just so cool. And, I always come across people, we always do, who were like, I read Goosebumps as a kid and made me want to like do what I do now. It made me want to become a horror writer or a horror director, and it could work with anything really. So the fact that like you said, Stein can like just enjoy doing this, and then it inspires other people in their lives is just a phenomenal thing. And yeah, definitely. And it could be the same. Definitely said the same for you, it being an inspiration in terms of your content. I mean, like I said, you've been doing video creation for years now, and you've inspired me. I'll certainly say
Oh,
that
thank
right now.
you.
Definitely, just to sort of go out there in the interwebs and speak your mind on what you like, and why it inspired you in that sort of sense. So, 100%.
Yeah, like I'm sure Goosebumps inspired us all in some way or another.
It's been
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. Even like writing stories is really like the best way to go too, because I just wrote, I adapted one of my screenplays into a book, which we'll be releasing soon. And basically, like, you write a screenplay, and it kind of sucks because you got to make that into the film and everything. There's so many different steps of the way, and that is going to like get somewhat compromised as it goes on. It might not be the exact same thing you wrote, but when you write a book, that's it. It's the book. Now they get to read exactly what you wrote. So I chose to adapt the screenplay into a book because like it could always be a movie still, and the book actually gets it even closer to being a movie. Because think about how many movies have been based on books anyway. So this way, it gets to, I get to put it out there. I get to put the story out there straight from my mind to the page. And it was so much fun writing it, because like when you're writing a screenplay, you're like, nobody's going to read this except the people who are in the movie, because it's not meant to be read. It's meant to be seen on the screen. But turning it into a book, it's like, no, this is now I can get into characters' minds in ways I couldn't before. And yeah, it was the best. It was like the best release of creative energy that I've had in a long, long time.
Absolutely. I can definitely imagine. And one thing
Great.
I hope I didn't neglect to mention this before, but I mean, you've injected a lot of that sort of passion into some of your current works. And even before you started doing Cinemassacre, I mean, you were making your own home movies, horror or otherwise. And it's just so cool that somebody can like express themselves in that way, and then it leads to a career like that. And even now, like horror especially, you've injected it into a lot of the stuff that you do, both in reviews and on shows like you've done in your Halloween episodes for Angry Video Game Nerd, or I remember like the Dream Phone in Board James, like that sort of thing. Just sort of injecting that horror filmmaking into those
Yeah,
videos.
yeah.
Always something that like fascinated me. My favorite's probably the Berenstein Bears AVGN, like the whole Mandela effect thing and just how that
Yeah.
all unravels is just phenomenal and a little creepy.
Oh, cool. Yeah, yeah. Glad you like that. That was a
Absolutely.
really fun one.
It was. I just remember like laughing at it. It was, especially the end. It's not Berenstein or Berenstain,
Yeah.
Bloodstain.
Yeah, I got to look at the camera when I say bloodstain. It's very
It's so
important.
funny.
Yeah.
It was amazing. I love it so much. Well,
Yeah.
on that note, that's gonna do it for tonight's episode of the Goosebumps Crew. James, I sincerely want to thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure, and I had a great time.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, this is great.
Absolutely. And you guys can find James over, of course, on Cinemassacre.com. You can follow him over at Cinemassacre on YouTube. Subscribe. Check out his content if you have not. I swear it is amazing content, no matter what show he's done. I can't sing the praises of him enough. So check him out over there. You could also follow him over on social media. All those links are going to be in the description below, so check them out. But yeah, thanks, James, for joining us. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. And of course, make sure you guys follow, as always, Bjorn and Nick at Goosebumps Oxfan and Sean, respectively, on their social medias and their YouTubes. If you like today's episode, make sure you leave a like and comment, subscribe to the Goosebumps Crew YouTube channel, Follow us on our audio platforms and social medias. All those links are in the description below, so check them out. We are coming to the end of GooseTober. October is approaching the end, but next week is Halloween, so we got some awesome stuff planned for you guys, including 2 episodes of the Goosebumps Crew podcast. Instead of 1, you're getting a bonus Halloween episode, so make sure you guys tune in next week. But until then, this has been the Goosebumps Crew podcast, and from all of us here, we want to wish you, as always, to take care, stay safe, and have a very scary day.